I do want to welcome both Brandi Baily and Shannon Stiles, right? Said that right? Shannon Stiles has actually started this week as our Deputy County Treasurer. And Brandy's been our County Treasurer for what, 6, 7, no?
Yesterday started my second term.
Yesterday started your tech, so congratulations on that. So Brandi is, she handles billions and billions of dollars on behalf of taxpayers here in Sedgwick County. But most recently, she's been in the news a little bit more because she also is the authority over all things that relate to tag offices. And there's been some changes recently, and so we might talk about that. I have some handouts. If you didn't, I know you guys all got the handouts today, but so with that, this is I'm going to go through some documents real quickly. This is the budget booklet. This has some great information in there. Real quickly, again, my name is Jim Howell. I'm a Sedgwick County Commissioner for District 5. District 5 is the southeast part of the county and has 106 square miles. It's the smallest geographic district, includes part of the city of Wichita, all of Derby, and all of Mulvaney in Sedgwick County, and then everything from 159th Street East, basically to the river, 119th Street South, basically to Kellogg. That's generally the district. Smallest district out of the 5. I'm, again, the 5th District Commissioner. There are 4 others. We have Pete Meister, which is northeast out by Bel Air and Keachai. We have Jeff Blubaugh, District number 2, out by Hayesville and Clearwater, has part of Wichita as well. Everybody has part of Wichita, I should say that. Ryan Beatty, which is out north central, has Park City, Valley Center, Mays. Then we have Stephanie Wise, who's out western Sedgwick County. Basically, the entire 2/5 of the entire western part of the county belongs to Stephanie Wise. She has 454 square miles out of the entire 1,009 square miles to the county. So about 2/5 of the entire county belongs to Stephanie Wise. And with that, so we have a budget here. We talk a lot about property taxes and sales taxes and other types of taxes that flows around government. As we have a county appraiser that starts the process, does assessed value determinations for every property owner in the county that's real property, and then eventually we pass a budget. There's a long process to pass a budget. We passed the budget in August. We just went through that not too long ago, and then eventually the budget is divided up amongst property tax. I should say property owners. Your assessed value is your apportionment of the government burden. I like to say it that way. We pass a budget. It's apportioned to every property tax. Excuse me. It's apportioned to every property owner based on assessed value. So you get a share of the total government burden based on your assessed value versus everybody else's assessed value. And so we divide out that government burden based on the assessment, if you will. Those tax bills are calculated by the county clerk, Kelly Arnold, and then they're eventually sent out in a tax bill that you'll receive. You'll get the first part of that in December and the second part of that in May. Those bills are sent out by our county treasurer. She sends out the bills and she receives the check back, or however you pay your taxes, you get that payment back to the county treasurer's office. Am I saying that correct so far? Okay, good. So that's kind of the how we do taxes. The county operates 46 distinct and different agencies, everything from public safety, which is our most important, I think, sector of the county budget. And it goes into, that includes things like the district courts. We fund everything that deals with providing support to our court system. The 18th Judicial District Court, I think we have, I believe, 32 district court judges, and we have 1 magistrate judge, and that includes both adult and juvenile judges. And we also, that public safety also includes things like the sheriff, the jail, that's our adult detention facility, our juvenile detention facility, our JIAC, our Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center. It includes juvenile residential facility, corrections, which deals with folks as they're transitioning back into the community. There's community corrections, both for adults and juveniles. It covers things like Forensic Science Center. If you ever watch TV and have a CSI show that does DNA testing and ballistics testing and that type of thing, that's called CSI. Here in Sedgwick County, it's called Regional Forensic Science Center. They do things like to solve those crimes and create evidence for the district attorney. And again, another one of our sectors is district attorney, who does charges people for their crimes and pursues criminal charges for those folks. So all that is part of our public safety sector of the budget. It includes things like drug court and veterans court. And I'm probably missing a few things, I suppose, but primarily everything that deals with both crime fighting, so the sheriff's office, the deputies, the law enforcement training center. So we have the law enforcement side, we have the prosecution side, we have the incarceration side, that's the jail and the corrections departments. All that falls under public safety. That's the largest part of our budget. So if you have this little booklet here, to go, for example, I like this last page here, one of the last pages. It talks about where does a dollar go. Well, it's on page 12 here, the booklet. So your average citizen per month, let's say they're spending $27.78 per month. This is for a $100,000 home, I guess it is. $100,000 home is going to pay $27.78 per month for county taxes. Of that, $15.60 goes to public safety. So that's, again, basically nearly half of all the dollars we collect goes to public safety. And then the next biggest part of this is general government. We also have, going on down, we have much smaller segments. Hello, come on in. Public safety being the most expensive part of the government, general government being the second most important part. General government covers things like the row offices. We use the word row office to mean our treasurer, the deeds, and clerk. It also covers things like human resources, onboarding, finance, basically the things you need to run an organization behind the scenes. All the administrative work that we do, purchasing and communications, and there's just a lot of things that falls under the idea of general government. The manager's office, actually the county commission would fall under that as well. County commission, the cost, our legal department falls under that. That's all general government, and general government is the second most expensive part of our budget. It's, again, out of that $27.78, that'd be $4.94, or roughly about 1/5 of the total cost for your tax dollars are going to fund general government. Then it breaks down to things that are a lot less expensive. I think the next most important thing on this list probably is public works. Public works we maintain and operate 600 bridges and roughly 600 bridges and 600 miles of roadway, paved roadway. Most of that's paved, I should say. And so we take care of roads and bridges under our public works department. And some of those things are some of the largest, most well-traveled parts of the entire county are under the Sedgwick County umbrella. Then we have health and welfare, things like the public health department, ComCare, our mental health department. We have things like culture and recreation. That includes, I think, let me count, there's 8 things, if I count them all correctly. Sedgwick County Zoo, Lake Afton, Sedgwick County Park, Northeast Park, African American Museum, Historical Museum, Exploration Place, and I'm missing one. I'll have to think of it just a second. But there's 7, I think there's 8 things actually fall under the Interest Bank Arena, I guess is the 8th one. Those 8 things are culture and recreation. We fund the operational side of those facilities. So that's what, so we take in your money and we spend the money. We pass that budget in August. And so any questions on the budget? So we passed a budget this last year. We actually lowered the mill levy about 1.4 mills. People say when the assessed value goes up faster than the rate of inflation, we have a choice in the government to lower the mill levy so we don't take in too many dollars. I'm sure you've heard this. I use the formula very simple, X times Y equals Z. If X was the assessed value and Y was the rate of taxation and Z was the tax dollars, we probably all care about the dollars most out of that formula. The dollars is kind of the most important thing there. So if assessed value goes up, let's say 8%, like it did this last year as a county, if we left the mill levy rate, the rate of taxation flat, we would have 8% more dollars on the other side of that equation. Well, that's more than we actually need to run government. We want to lower the dollars down to about roughly the rate of inflation. So we captured, I think it was 5, I should memorize it. It's been a while since we talked about the budget already. I believe it was it was about 5%. We increased the budget, actually take that back, it was about 4.5%. About 4.5% increase in the budget this last year. And that 4.5% is actually is a bigger number than the rate of inflation. The rate of inflation is about 3.5%. So you might say, well, then you're growing government because you grew the budget faster than the rate of inflation. That is one way to look at it, and I think there's an argument to be made there. But if you add in the new construction portion of what we do here, new construction added to the assessed value, and so that's when you talk about new construction, that means we have to have more of everything to provide services to the larger Sedgwick County population. So new construction is a addition to consumer price index or inflation. So that 4.5% is a pretty good benchmark for the rate of growth. There is a topic, Senate Bill 13 that passed, I think, in 2019, talks about the revenue neutral rate. And if you guys are familiar with that term, you probably got a notification in the mail around, what was it, May or June? June. It talks about all the jurisdictions you pay taxes to. I paid taxes to nine different jurisdictions. And of the 9 jurisdictions, 5 of those belong to schools, USD 260 something. There's 5 jurisdictions for schools, and the other 4 jurisdictions are city, county, El Paso, and I forget the last one. But of those 9 jurisdictions, 20% of my money goes to Sedgwick County government. The other 8 jurisdictions is the other 80% of my tax bill. So the 20% that funds Sedgwick County is if you look at that revenue neutral rate notice, it lists all the jurisdictions there and what they plan to do with your taxes. And you guys live out in Eagle Nest. What's your additions? Fairway Meadows, okay. So Fairway Meadows, I think, is maintained by township. So you don't get one that says Derby, City of Derby on it because you're outside the City of Derby, but it does say Fairway Meadows. Or it should say your township, which I believe would be, in this case, would be Gibson Township, okay? So whatever their budget proposal was, they have to put out a plan, so to speak, before budget adoption day, and they say we're going to increase taxes above last year's tax levy. And if they want to do that, they actually have to have a special public hearings, and they have to publish it, and they have to vote. It has to be all above board. It gives you guys a chance to attend those meetings and tell them what you think before they pass that budget. And so we send out those notifications in June. Primarily, they're very confusing. You look at this sheet, it's actually very confusing. But what that revenue neutral rate is defined as is essentially last year's tax levy with no increase. Well, as you know, inflation happened. So if you don't have some type of adjustment in the mill levy, the tax levy, I should say, then how do you pay for the rising cost of things like electricity and insurance and wage increases for the staff and everything else that you have to cover? So a 3 or 4% increase is probably kind of defensible, but if you start going above that, then it starts to say, well, you're growing faster than the rate of inflation. So revenue neutral rate is an interesting idea, but I would argue the only way you can stay under the revenue neutral rate is if you have huge amount of ending balance, which means you've overtaxed in the past and saved up the money, or you're hugely inefficient and you find efficiencies, which helps you balance the books without raising the tax levy, or you cut services. So it's got to be one of those 3 things. So if you don't want to cut services, you feel like you're already efficient, you don't use your ending balance from previous years, then exceeding the revenue neutral rate to something that's reasonable, like the rate of inflation, is a pretty good argument to say that's the rate we should grow at. Anyway, I think we did our job this year. We lowered the mill levy about 1.4 mils this year, which I think is commendable. We didn't have to do that. 1.4 mils, if you think about it, about $7.5 million per mill. So about $11 million cut in our budget. We did not take $11 million in property taxes this next year. We gave that up, trying to make sure we don't grow the government too fast. So hopefully, is any questions on that? Anybody? Okay. So that's taxes and spending. Our property tax levy this year is going to be about $209 million. A year ago it was about $199 million and change. I'll just call it $200 million. So we raised the property tax levy by about let's say around $9 million. Technically speaking, it was slightly less than half of the assessed value growth. So we captured less than 50% of the assessed value growth. The other, more than 50%, we actually gave up and did not put that in our budget. All right. Any questions on this? You guys have had a chance to look at this. Any questions on the little booklet? We're going pretty quick here. No? Let's do what Brandy's probably patiently waiting here for this. Yes, sir, go ahead.
What page was that? Page 9, if you look at that pie graph, the circle graph,
Okay.
the blue section is labeled 8.6. I'm assuming that this is supposed to capture percentages of that whole circle?
Yeah, I believe that's,
Are we out of scale there on some of these, or?
let's see here, I believe.
Because I see that blue on the bottom right hand at 8.6 is larger than the 9.4 at the top of the circle. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if that's a typo. A very good observation there. I'm going to have to go see if that graphic is messed up. I don't think that 9.4 is correct. That's a good question. Very observant, by the way. I'll have to ask our communications folks to clarify that. My guess is this probably should be 5.4 or 4.4. I think they have a typo in the number. I think the graph is probably correct. What I think is wrong is the 9. And the 9 probably should be a 5 or a 4. Yeah, I think that's an error. So again, good job. You should get a job as a technical review person, because that was very good. Yeah. Is that your question, or is there any?
No, that's really it.
Okay.
I don't understand how I was misinterpreting this.
No, I don't think it's you. I think it's an error in the graph. I think you did right. I think the number is I think the graph is correct, but the number that's designating the portion of that is incorrect. Yeah. And that would make sense to me based on what that is. So, okay. Any other questions on this?
Confirm that the school gets paid from the state.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of crazy ideas on how to, if we get time, I have some things I'd like to talk about, how to reform property taxes in Kansas. And several of those things are, I think, are interesting ideas. And I don't think the legislature is going to take time this year to substantially change how we do things, unfortunately. They're planning on a very short session this year. But of the 9 jurisdictions, I mentioned 5 of those jurisdictions go to USD 260, which is Derby school system, because I live in Derby. And of those 5, I think one of those is a bond issue. One of those is the 20 mills for schools that the state levies on behalf of USD 260. So whether you want to call that a state or call that 260, it doesn't really matter to me, because it still ends up in the school system. Then there is a DRC, which is 7.53 mills. I believe that's the right number of property tax. So out of the total property taxes I pay, 7.53 mills goes to DRC. Since you guys live outside the city of Derby, you might have noticed you're probably still paying a DRC tax, I'm guessing, right? So that's 7.53 mills of property tax. Yeah, that could be changed, but right now that's what it is. And but anyway, so I think back to your question is I believe, and I may be wrong, because I've not looked at all the budgets since they passed the budgets in August, but I need to go back and do that. I'm actually collecting the data right now. I haven't actually got it all compiled yet. But I don't know that there's anything that says USD 260 that didn't take the full assessed value growth. In other words, what I'm saying is if the assessed value growth for Sedgwick County was, let's say, 8%, that's how much assessed value went up, is 8%. I believe all the 5 jurisdictions that I pay taxes to that says USD 260, all 5 of those, I believe, took the maximum increase. They didn't reduce the mill levy at all. Okay? I don't think they did, though. I don't think they did, and that could be wrong. But I can tell you the city of Derby lowered theirs, I think, about a $0.5 which was more than I think they've lowered it in a long time. So Derby did a good job. They lowered theirs about $0.5. So as a Derby resident, 1.4 from the county and $0.5 from the city, I'm almost a $2 reduction in my property tax levy rate. Okay, but here again, my property taxes that went up are going to be going up because my assessed value was increased by quite a bit because the market on housing is going up. So anyway, it's a great discussion. Talk about how those two things work together to create tax dollars. And so even though mill levy rate's going down, assessed value rate's going up enough that we're all probably paying an increase in tax dollars to the government. Question is, who are you paying those extra dollars to? And one of the things I'd like to encourage us all to do is be aware of the different jurisdictions. It's almost like when you get your paycheck, you might say, well, how much money did I pay to FICA this paycheck? How much money did I pay to different deductions or anything I paid out money to? And you look at the check stub, all the details are right there, but most of us don't look at the details. They just look at how much we get paid. If you look at that at all, you might even just call the bank or look at the bank account and say, well, they deposited this much money and that's really as far as I'm going to go with this. I don't have any more data than that. I'm only looking at the bottom number. That's all I care about. And so at the end of the day, we have the information available, but very few of us actually look at the data to figure out how that money is impacted by different things, like different taxing jurisdictions, if you will. But back to your question, back to your point here, I think, is that the state of Kansas and again, USD 260, those are state schools. Those are state employees. Those teachers are employed by the state of Kansas. Capers for them is state capers for teachers. Okay, so the buildings are owned by the state. The teachers are state employees. They are governed by the Kansas Department of Education, as well as the Kansas Board of Education has governing authority over the USD school districts. And so everything about them is a state function. And it gets me to an interesting point. When we start talking about property tax reform, one of the ideas I have is paying our property taxes differently than we do currently. And if I have time, I'll get to that in a few minutes. Remind me of this, Dale, because I would like to describe maybe a better way to pay our property taxes. It actually might make people less angry. It doesn't necessarily make people happy, but it might make people less angry. And that, to me, is a goal still. So let's see, where was I going with that? You had a question. Any other questions on the budget?
Not really. I mean, I understand a lot better. We did the calculation. If you subtract everything out, that gray area should be 4.7.
Okay, so you did the math? Okay, very good. All right, very good. Okay. Okay, so we have a couple of handouts. One is just information. This is a part of a news release. I just put it on a blank sheet of paper and cleaned it up a little bit. And there are some bullet points on the back side. And by the way, just want to point out once again that I appreciate Brandi Baily, our elected county treasurer, is here today with our deputy county treasurer, Shannon Stiles. If you don't know Shannon Stiles, she's right behind you. Right there she is. And so in the news recently has been a decision that was made to consolidate the office of the tag office on Kellogg with the office at Douglas, I think 2525 West Douglas, at Douglas and Meridian. Bring those two offices together. And
That was recently?
yeah, that was really started, the new configuration started what, yesterday? Yesterday.
Because this then talks about opening up 2 new satellites.
That's right. So that's part of the solution to the problem, is that she is opening. You'll notice on the page that starts out, Sedgwick County opens 2 new satellite locations for tag and title work. There is one location is a Ruffin building at 100 North Broadway. People say we have to pay for parking. Actually, I don't think you have to pay for parking right outside that building. So the parking's actually not a problem. It's considered short-term parking, but you can park outside the building for free. It's curb, it's parallel on the road around the building. Walk right in and get your tag work done. And then the other one is the Hayesville City Hall. And obviously no parking challenge there. That'd be easily to get in and get out of there. Both of those are operating on an appointment basis. So you can't just show up. You need to call ahead, get an appointment. Now, if you do have an appointment, as Brandi said, please show up to your appointment. Don't just make an appointment and then not show up. That actually causes more trouble. So, but again, if you have an appointment, you walk in, you get immediate service. You may be in and out of there in just a couple of minutes, really. It doesn't take long as you have an appointment. One of the challenges, of course, is making sure you have the right paperwork, which is what this one's getting to. What paperwork do you need? This is a great graphic. I don't know who came up with this. That's new, isn't it?
We worked with Brandon on that.
Brandon, did you do that? You assisted? Well, that's great, because I always scratch my head and say, I hope I have all the right things I need when I go there. I never know until when I walk out and I'm actually successful, it's like, wow, that was great. I'm so glad I did the right thing. I have been frustrated a few times when I walked out because I didn't know what to do and I did things wrong. So there's a graphic here that talks about what to take to the transactions that you're prepared. So that's a smart handout. Good job on that.
Is this graphic going to go out with a notification of title renewals?
I don't think we plan on doing that, but maybe.
So your title renewals, that notification comes from the state of Kansas, and it doesn't come from our office directly here in Sedgwick County. So you'll get those from Kansas, and so since we've created this in Sedgwick County, they don't go together.
So let me ask, just for the video's sake, he
Yeah.
asked the question, will we send out this notification, this beautiful graphic with the renewal notification? The answer is probably not, because that comes from the state of Kansas, and this is a Sedgwick County graphic. So
And we're in the process of updating the Treasurer's website on the motor vehicle side, and so this will, yeah.
earlier, you guys were talking about VIN inspections. Did you guys decide the answer?
So we were talking about VIN inspections, and they said VIN inspections at the beginning of the year went to where you have to make an appointment through the Kansas Highway Patrol for a VIN inspection, and that they do those inspections at the Douglas office, the tag office, or in Keachai. And we were told by KHP, we will only see you if it's made by an appointment. We will not do walk-ins, but they're telling me that they were able to just walk in. And so it sounds like that if they don't have appointments scheduled, which I'm surprised that they don't have appointments scheduled, because I'm told they're like 7 days out on appointments right now.
They are, but then they squeeze other people.
Maybe there's a no-show and they have some free time,
Right,
so they
so,
just.
so you might get lucky, I don't know. Sounds like you got lucky.
No,
Yeah,
I
so-
had an appointment.
Oh, you had an appointment.
The gal next to me did not, and
Okay.
she
Okay.
got in right after me,
Yeah,
and there was.
but they have told us, and they've sent us memos multiple times that please make sure they have appointments, because we're not just working them in, but.
And I asked the guy that was doing them, I said, so you can just walk up, and he goes, yeah, we'll get to you eventually.
Well, I think it kind of, if that's the case, it depends on who it is, I will say. That's
Well, anyway, so it
probably-
sounds like, again,
Yeah.
so they do VIN inspections at the Douglas office, but ideally you'd have an appointment to get that
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
Even that, if you don't have an appointment, you might have to come back later to do it, I guess, with an appointment.
And I
so.
heard this morning, I believe they're like 7 days out on
Okay.
VIN inspections.
But overall, you have made, one thing I would say this, in the last 2 days, there have been some really nice comments come out. There's been a lot of angry people for the last several weeks going out. But last couple of days have been refreshing, because they have said, we notice there's lots of staff. All the windows are being filled and people are getting right in, and that's refreshing, is it not? That's
No,
great to hear
it's
that.
very refreshing. So
Yes.
yesterday was amazing. We had a couple little hiccups yesterday, and I thought, okay, today will be better. So today we had good compliments yesterday, but today we were standing there, and I just had people, and I'm sure they recognize me now because I've been on the news how many times now, and so they come up to me and they're like, this was efficient, and I'm surprised how quickly I was in and able, and this is nice and good decision. And so, and I heard that multiple times today. I did not hear one single negative comment. And I know Shani and I have talked today. She's like, you know what? I didn't hear any negative comments, because I just wanted to kind of hear what public were saying out
Well,
there.
considering the rash of bad news stories from especially KWCH,
Yeah.
KTV, and KSN, and I mean that sometimes they're posting 2 or 3 stories a day, and they're getting like hundreds of comments, and a lot, the anger that's surrounding this has been extensive.
Yeah.
I hope they do the right thing and put out some positive news stories.
Well, yesterday
They owe it to us, I
Yeah.
think, to do that.
Yesterday, I did talk with Keenan from KWCH yesterday. He showed up at the tag office, and I was there. And he's like, "Can I talk to you?" I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, "I've actually been out in the parking lot talking to people." And he's like, "I've heard all positive comments today." And I said, "Run that." And so I talked to Brandon earlier, and he said he saw it, and he says people were complimenting and actually had positive comments. So I hope that
Yeah.
more news stations will come and talk and hear more positive comments. That's the hopes.
Things, because the gal I talked to when I actually went back from my title work last week, I asked her some questions about, combining offices, and she goes, I really think it's gonna be for the better. And so every negative comment I saw on Facebook, which wasn't a whole lot, but several times, I said, please be patient. They got this,
Well-
And so, people are just always so negative news.
If you remove yourself from this entire discussion,
Yeah.
just think about philosophically. If I ask a very simple question, don't think about tag offices right now. Do you support consolidation of government offices if it's more efficient? If you provide better services for less costs, and those are the reasons for consolidation. If you could do that, and the answer is almost always yes. So it's interesting here. Everyone assumed this was going to be a negative on service. That's why they were upset, I think. But now that they're seeing that it's actually, and the argument back is, we have the same number of people providing services in a single location. It's not, or we're not reducing services. It's just it's more streamlined, if you will. Maybe that's a good word?
Yeah, and I will tell you, so today I did run the numbers as far as how many transactions we processed yesterday versus how many transactions did we process a week ago from yesterday. And we were 100 off. So we were 100 less, but like I said, when we first started in the morning, we had a couple little hiccups. But we were 100 less yesterday than we were a week ago from both locations.
That's awesome.
And because,
Yes.
and Brandy's done some analysis on this. She knows there's some odd reasons why this surge is happening right now. It has to do with people are changing cars because of the hail damage that we experienced a while back. That's part of it. Second of all, is the personalized plates has caused a lot of this because apparently they're all due at one time or something. I don't know how that works, but.
Yeah. So state statute says that every 5 years, all the personalized plates have to be replaced out because every 5 years the license plate for personalized plates changed. And so this is that 5-year cycle. It ends in a 0 and it ends in 5. And this is the 5-year cycle. Well, back in 2020, I wasn't treasurer. It was COVID. And so nobody thought about that because at that time they were having to only let a few people in the building at a time. And so it wasn't as noticeable. So this year, I didn't know what to expect, and this kind of really caught me off guard. Believe me, I'll be prepared next time. But it says you have to replace personalized plates every 5 years, and that is this year. The hope we're working on legislation to try to get that changed where if you want to do it, if you want to replace these personalized plates, okay, that's fine, but let's stagger it. Let's not do it all in one single year, because right now, from this month, this year versus this time last year, right now we're at a 500% increase in replacing personalized plates right now.
And let me point out this also. This is interesting because people think, well, you're getting plenty of money into the offices for fees. Mm-hmm. The reality is we're keeping the smallest portion of those fees. Most of that money goes to the state of Kansas. And they use that to run government, I guess, but a lot of it maybe go, I don't know what they do with the money exactly, but.
So I would tell you all that money goes to KDOT.
KDOT, okay. The one fee that bothers me, and you're welcome to comment as well, but they charge it since 2008.
Yes.
They've been collecting a $4 transaction fee that is used for it's called a modernization fee. And that modernization fee is charged on every transaction, no matter how the transaction is completed. And I've done some simple math here, how many transactions that probably would be. I don't know if anybody else has done the math on this, but I think it's well over $200 million they've collected, maybe $250 million they've collected since 2008. And again, if they want to collect fees for KDOT, they should just call it that. They should call it a fee for KDOT. That'd be honest. But they call it a modernization fee. And one of our biggest challenges right now is this antiquated, archaic system that we have. It crashes several times per week. It's unreliable. It's a statewide server and it's not reliable. So when it crashes, it just creates havoc in these offices. The reality is it needs to be updated. It needs to be updated and the whole system needs to be updated, but they've not used the money to update the system. They've actually used the money just to sweep those funds and give it to KDOT. Meanwhile, this antiquated, archaic system continues to crash. So the state has done a disservice to us all because they're collecting this $4 fee, and they've been essentially lying to all of us since 2008 as they collect this fee.
And who does that?
The tag offices collect the fee because it's state law.
I know, but who exactly is making the decision not to update the system?
The legislature.
Okay.
Again, I happen to know one of those pretty well, but I don't think it's her fault. It's a bigger discussion. The Kansas Department of Revenue, I believe, is allowing this to happen, and they're probably the ones that should make the decision and say we're actually going to dig in and do this now. Yeah. There seems to be some resistance on their part to actually update the system because doing something different and new is going to be it's going to be challenging, of course. And so I think there's a desire for them not to make the change, but we know they really need to make the change, and I don't know when they're going to do that, but I think we've made a pretty loud response this year that they really have to do something on this. And anyway, either they shouldn't charge the $4, which I'm not against the $4. That's okay. I just want them to use the money for what it's intended for. You know.
So he said 2008 is when that came on. So our system, the motor vehicle system, was put in place in 2007. So this modernization fee was intended to be collected so that way they could keep that system up to date and keep whatever. Well, since 2007, they've been collecting that to keep the system up to date, but they never used that to keep the system up to date. And then they decided, well, it's not being used at KDOR to update the system, and KDOT can use the money, so we're just sweeping it over to KDOT. So that's where that $4 now goes, is to KDOT. And yeah.
All right, so, and people say, well, why don't you just hire more people? The problem is, this is a fee-funded office, and then Brandi and I get sideways on this one a little bit. This is a fee-funded office, and there's a maximum they're allowed to charge. They only charge it if you come into the facility. It's a facility fee. If you do it online, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandi, but if you do it online or through the mail, we still have to process those transactions, but we don't get a fee to cover the cost of someone doing that work.
50 cents.
No, that goes to the state.
Oh, that
And the
makes
state
sense.
doesn't touch it at all.
So we only get paid if you come into the facility, and of course the facility has to pay for janitorial and lights and air conditioning, heating and snow removal and everything else that has to go on there, plus the staff. And so people say, well, just hire more people. It really isn't that simple, because that fee is capped at $5 per person per facility. It's a facility fee. It's charged. They do 3 transactions at the same time. You charge them 3 times, or you just charge them, I don't know how many.
No, it's 3 times.
3 times?
It's per transaction.
But still, they have to come into the office there to do that fee. If they do this online or through the mail, that fee is not assessed. And so there is someone in the back room that's doing a lot of that work. So we're still paying someone to do work, but they're not getting paid. We're not getting paid to do that. So this system is, in my opinion, almost designed to fail. Okay, so.
And all that mail stuff that you said that comes into the back office to do that work, it actually, yeah, it's more convenient for you to do that online. You don't have to come to the tag office, but I will tell you, it takes more time and more effort to process that transaction in the back office than it does if you were to come in that office, because lots of times if you owe delinquent, so every single one of those, we have to go through every single one of those to verify, to make sure that that person doesn't owe delinquent personal property tax, because you are not allowed to get your tags if you owe delinquent personal property. So we are checking every single renewal in the back office to make sure you don't owe that. Well, if you do owe it, well, now we have to stop. We have to get you a letter, put a letter in the mail saying you owe this delinquent personal property tax before you get your sticker that you've paid for now. And then now we have to wait on a response for the customer to either come in or mail us back that. So we have piles, I don't want to say piles, but we have some mail still sitting there because we're not able to process it, because not everything's complete. So it does take a whole lot more time and effort to process an online renewal in the back office than if you were to just come in.
What else did you want to talk about that I've not raised on this
I
issue?
don't know.
I would say this. I am in favor personally of some modernization for the state, and I talked a little bit about. I believe there's 5 other states that have privatized portions of this function. This is primarily an administrative function. Could someone in the private sector learn how to do this and do it in a way that would transfer this from a government office to the private sector, still doing the same type of service? In other words, imagine my shelter insurance guy maybe would learn how to do this, and he would be issued the credentials and the computer and the access or whatever it would be to do this type of work. As long as he knows what he's doing and it's administratively trained, certified, licensed, whatever credentials you have to have. You know, 5 states have privatized portions of tag office work. It doesn't mean that titles, I think, are more complicated, because titles, if you make a mistake on a title, it's very difficult to fix that, because you make a mistake, this is a record of someone's property. And so I think title work might need to stay probably with the government sector is my guess. But maybe the renewal and the collection of property taxes, registration fees, and issuing plates and registration tag stickers and all that, that's pretty much administrative work, and maybe there's things in the private sector that could do portions of that work. So I want to have the conversation, think that maybe we should take a look at that as a state. But again, this is a state discussion. It's not a county commissioner discussion. There really isn't any one county that can lead on this. I think it's whether the legislature wants to talk about, do they want to modernize this and do something like some other states have done. Oklahoma, I understand, has done this, and it's worked pretty well in Oklahoma. So rather than having one central tag office, we would have other places in the county do a lot of the administrative work could be done at different places around the county. And they might change their hours. Someone might open earlier, someone might be open later, some of them might charge different fees. Maybe there's a fee window. They can go from this $0 all the way up to some other number, so that the portion of those fees is retained by the person doing the service. They would have to collect money on behalf of the state of Kansas and remit those to the state. It would be complicated. And there may be reasons why this is not doable, but I think a conversation probably should happen. There's a lot of people interested in this idea, but whether or not this is something we can do in Kansas, I don't know. I can just say this, on a 75-day session, which is probably what they're going to do this year, they're going to be out before Easter, sounds like. So the idea of, revising something significant like that in a very short session, there just isn't time to have that conversation. So I really don't think this is something, we can talk about it between us, but the legislature has to act. I don't think there's any will on their part to actually do something significant like that. So as the discussion will continue in the background, but there's no real willpower to change things in Kansas. Right? Any comment about that, Brandi?
About title work being done at certain dealerships and stuff.
So
Yeah, that's another thing she's talking about doing right now.
So the discussion that we're having, for example, CarMax already does this, and so we're trying to model what CarMax does and trying to capture that and present that to other dealers. So what happens is when you come in and you buy a car, you do all your paperwork, and CarMax actually has figured out how to allow what you're going to charge, or what it's going to cost you to tag your vehicle, to work that into your loan. So they've got it all worked into the loan, the paperwork, and then CarMax will not sell a car unless they have the actual title in hand. So, because most of their vehicles are used cars and they're out-of-state titles, which require an inspection. So when they sell that car, they give the customer their title and said, okay, you have 7 days. Take your vehicle, go get the inspection. When you get that inspection within that 7 days, come back, bring us the title back, bring us your inspection report back. We will put it with all this paperwork, and then you've already paid us because we've now included in the loan, because they've created in their software, in their company software, how to calculate the fees of what it's going to cost to tag a vehicle, and they're pretty accurate at it. Sometimes they're a few dollars off, but they say that they'll just eat that cost on their end because they see it as a benefit to their customer. But so they'll package that all together and put a check with it, send it to the tag office. And we have a fleets and dealers department in our tag office, and so the ladies back there take these packets that they send us, and usually we get about 100, 150 of them a day from CarMax. And within 2 to 3 days is our turnaround time right now, and we'll get them all registered, and then we send either the documents directly to their customer, or we send them back to CarMax, whichever the customer decides. Do they want to go to CarMax and pick it up, or are they okay with it going by mail? And then whatever they decide to do, and then they're done.
So
The customer never has to come into the office.
So basically, just let me understand, to make sure I'm understanding so I can pass on that information, is the dealership is getting everything prepped and ready, but you're still processing.
Yeah. So so that's what we're working with some other car dealerships on, is we're going to let us help you and tell you exactly what we need. Let's try to figure out how we can do this calculation. There's calculators out there on the website, but I'm going to tell you they're not very accurate, and it does not include all the fees. So I want to create a calculator, and I've asked the state to help me get me the algorithm on what's in the motor vehicle system, so that way I can calculate it so a customer can go out online and just calculate it and know exactly what it's going to cost. Oh, they refuse to do that. They won't do that. And I was in a meeting with Chairman Baily, Pete Meitzner, some ITs, the CFO, with KDOR, and they will tell you too, the state will not do that for us. And so we are working with our IT team at Sedgwick County to see if we can come up with getting that calculation where it's pretty accurate. And then working with that dealership so they can just put in the VIN, put in your zip code, put in your last name, because it's based off of your last name letter, right, on what property tax is going to be, depending on where the month falls. And how do we get that calculator so that way we are pretty accurate on what it's going to cost you to tag your vehicle? Because these other dealerships, I don't think they're interested in working it into the finance package. So then what they want to do is fill out a credit card authorization form, send it to us, let us process it. We've got the credit card authorization form, so we can just charge the customer, and then we send the receipt and everything back to the dealership, and then the dealership would call their customer to come in. Because most dealerships that we're talking to right now are new dealerships, new car dealerships, and if they don't have that title on hand, that's not a big deal because we're not requiring an inspection. So they still have time to gather that paperwork, get it over, and get everything back to their customer within that 60 days. So that's what we're talking with the dealerships right now. And I've got, and the one dealership specifically that that's kind of we're working with to really get this off the ground. They have 5 dealerships, and they tell me between those 5 dealerships, they have about 500 customers, 500 sales a month. So if that's 500 customers that we can prevent from coming actually into the tag office, that's going to cut down on the lines tremendously and make it more efficient and less
title work, I
things.
just estimated, I'm gonna say title work probably takes 3 times longer than a renewal,
Yeah.
3 to
title
4 times
work,
longer, so.
it usually takes
it's
about
a-
30 minutes.
20 minutes on
It's a longer
Yeah.
process, so
Yeah.
You had an inspection.
taking title work out of the office is gonna do a lot to help
Oh, yeah.
the entire system, right?
Yes.
How
Okay.
stable is the algorithm the state uses to calculate that cost?
We mean how stable?
I mean, is it something that they change that algorithm periodically?
Well, it depends on what the tax rate is, because part of the algorithm includes the property tax for that county, but then it also includes the property tax for the specific city that your vehicle is housed in. So it does change yearly as those tax rates go up and down. And then if sales tax rate change, then we have to change the sales tax rate to make sure the dealership has collected enough. If they haven't, then we have to collect it in the tag office.
So that means that even though you create a calculator that can simulate what the state is doing, you're gonna have to be chasing that change every year.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's still a great idea, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, just
So changing
a
our,
lot of people would share
Yeah.
that with you.
Yeah, yeah, but
changing our attention to the legislative platform, you'll notice the top of the page is legislative priorities, top of the page is treasurer. Well, we've already been talking about this for a while. But she's still taking the conversation because we talked, so in the middle of that page it says privatize the administration portion of the, again, that's just a discussion. It doesn't mean that this is gonna be anything we would expect to happen this year. I don't think there's any chance whatsoever any of this is gonna happen this year. The top of the bullet says support legislation appropriating additional budget for the county treasurer's office. Let me point out, again, this is a fee-funded office, and one of the challenges we have right now is, again, Sedgwick County was the last, I believe, of 105 counties where the treasurers had to go to the county commissioners and say, we need a subsidy. We don't have enough money from the fees to run this office. So in our decision then is say, either we're gonna fund it with property tax dollars, or we're not gonna fund it, and then what's gonna happen? What are we gonna do then? Lock the door and, furlough our employees? What's the plan? So this last year, again, I think we've lowered the costs because we consolidated these two offices. The actual costs to operate this joint office now is going to be less than what it would have been. Going back to what it would have been, though, it was a request of $951,000 for 2026. The county approved $451,000 out of that $951,000, but we knew at the time we were working on this change of facility footprint. So that was, in a sense, an attempt to get her close. We do have contingency funds. So should we need to make a decision later in the year to do something with contingency funds to help this office, we can make that discussion and that decision later in the year in 2026. But in terms of the budget, we budgeted $451,000 for 2026, and I believe there are some savings because we changed the footprint. So I'm not sure how far off we are right now. It's not what it would have been.
right, we're pretty close. We're probably gonna be really close, and if we go over, part of my plan I had presented to commissioners was to look at cutting some positions, but then I don't want this to affect the employees. And so I'm going to do the best I can to what can we do. And so I think we can come pretty close to where we need to be, so that way we're at that break-even point.
But anyway, here's the problem is if we don't make any other changes, the cost of this is going to continue to go up, and of course
Yeah.
the fees are capped. So something's got to give. Either we're going to fund this with subsidies every year and it's going to increase, because again, everything costs more year after year. Costs are going to go up, and the fees are now capped. So legislatively, we're asking the legislature to do a couple of things. One of the things we would do is, I like this idea the best. I think we'd change the facility fee to a transaction fee. So rather than just charging that if you come into the office, we would charge it, because when we talked about a minute ago, if you send it in through the mail or through the online, there's still someone at the office doing work for you, but you're not paying for that person. Someone else is paying for that person. As a fee-funded office, that doesn't make sense. I think we ought to, we might even be able to lower the fee a little bit. If it was a transaction fee, charged for every single transaction, you might see we may not need to be $5. I think you would adjust the fee to whatever number you need it to be, knowing you could go up to $5 if you had to, but it should be a transaction fee rather than a facility fee. So if you make that one change, if the legislature was to make that one change, I think it would fully fund this office and then some. We would have plenty of money to hire all the staff you'd want, I would think, at that point to do that. The problem is the legislature, again, the other alternative to that is to increase the fee. To say, let's go to some other number. So go up to $10, let's just say. Well, the legislature have already basically told us they're not interested in letting that happen. I think the reason is because they view that as them letting a tax increase happen. As a fee, the fee should cover the cost of your transaction, but they view this as a tax, and they're going to be blamed for the fee increase. They're going to be called the tax increase. They don't want to be responsible for tax increase. So to get them to support that is very unlikely. We've already heard from leadership on both sides, House and Senate, saying we're not going to do that. So the idea of lifting that cap, raising the cap, is just, it seems to be unlikely that will happen. Then the second thing on this list is, this is more of a Jim Howell idea. I'm not sure that I still like this idea. I know there's some technical reasons why it's not as easy as it sounds, but lifting the geographic boundaries. You might remember that back in the day, we had those plates that were stamped, and they were the raised letters, and the tag person would sit and turn like this. They grab a plate off the stack and they'd hand you your plate. Well, you had to be in your county of your residence in order to do that transaction, because those plates were sitting right there. Well, we've moved past that. Now they order the plate on the computer. They order the plate, someone else prints it, and then they mail it to you. So that geographic idea that you have to do it at your own county office is kind of an antiquated idea. And I know 2025, we ought to be able to modernize this portion. I know it's complicated because, again, she's already mentioned, in Sedgwick County, how many jurisdictions do you have where you charge different rates because of where you live? You mentioned the city, but you might live out in the county. The rates are going to change. No matter where you live, the rates are always going to change a little bit. And so there's the complexity of where do you live and how much we charge you is a complex discussion. Also, so the idea here is saying, if I wanted to go to, let's say Andover has a tag office, or I want to go to Wellington or Hutchinson or Salina and do my tag work, because right now I can go to Kansas City and get my driver's license done. That happens today. I can do it today. It's a statewide system. Okay, I can go anywhere in the state to get my driver's license taken care of. I can go out of county. It doesn't really matter where you go, but you have to get your tag work done in the county where you reside. So the idea is this one is lift that so you can go anywhere in the state to any tag office of any county and get tag work done. Well, again, it's complicated because, as Brandi's already said, the tables that drive this system is very complex. Just in Sedgwick County, we may have a couple hundred different tax rates potentially that could be charged. And of course, then you talk about the last name, and then someone's got to collect the money. And imagine if you're doing this in Hutchinson, they got to collect the money for Sedgwick County. They got to send that to the state, and some of that money comes back. So it's complicated. I'm not saying it's not complicated, but I still think it's a good idea. I think it's all just technical reasons why we're not doing this. I think those ought to be solvable problems personally. So I would like to see us, again, modernize the system so that you can go anywhere in the state of Kansas and get your tag work done. That seems like a good idea to me, personally.
They need to build that in.
Update the state computers. So Kansas Department of Revenue technology needs to be fully updated. And then expand the online capacity and stagger personalized plates. That was already, she talked about that. Rather than having these things all come due at one time, that seems silly. There's no reason for that. I can't imagine why they even set it up that way, but they did. And then we talked about the transaction fee being a different way of charging a fee. Anything else on Treasurer?
No, I guess that whole stagger personalized patient, I would tell you that statute is from 1975.
Oh, wow.
So maybe not as many vehicles on the road as there are today. And then when we talk about the fees, those fees are 50 years old. So they have not been changed in 50 years.
So moving on,
we are trying to operate an office on a fee that was charged 50 years ago, and no business could survive on a fee that was 50 years ago. So I don't know why they expect.
They probably picked a giant number thinking they'll never get to that fee. Of course, it's 30 years later,
Yeah.
45 years later. I don't know. Anyway, so the next two items on this list are actually very interesting. Corrections. So the state corrections created an advisory board to look at how corrections funding is distributed across the state of Kansas. And I don't remember exactly how many people were represented at that meeting. They had a series of meetings, and they finally came up with a new formula. And the formula, unfortunately, strips about $2 million or so from Sedgwick County corrections, and it hands the money to other counties. Johnson County stands to increase almost $1 million. Okay, $1 million just for Johnson County in increase, and this is based on case count rather than the complexity of these cases. So the distribution formula has changed significantly, and this is something that State Corrections came up with this idea. The governor apparently is supportive of it, and the Secretary of Department of Corrections is behind it. And so we are squawking, saying this isn't what should happen in our state. We're going to stand to lose all this revenue, and it's going to substantially hurt what we do here in Sedgwick County. Our public safety will be impacted by this. So our choice is, if we leave things as they are right now, we have to subsidize this also with property tax dollars, or not do the service, which means, in my opinion, that means that you as the public are not going to be safe. We're transitioning people who are the bad guys, who are incarcerated, back into the private sector. Do you want us to do that carefully and thoughtfully and take care of making sure nothing bad happens? Or do you want us to not do that? And say, so again, the state of Kansas has made, in my opinion, a very bad choice. It puts the pressure on property taxpayers if we're going to do this at all. So we're challenging the state on this. The Secretary of Corrections apparently is on their way to Sedgwick County to have a discussion. I got a nice letter from him yesterday or today. In my opinion, they're simply explaining their position. They're not moving towards what we want. So we're not seeing any movement. They're simply explaining and defending what the state's already chosen to do. My opinion is going to be a huge loss for Sedgwick County. The next one is historic. This is a bill. So just so you know, we passed a 1% sales tax back in, I think, 1985, and it passed. It wasn't a huge win. It was a close call, but this is a permanent 1% sales tax. The intent of the sales tax was primarily to lower property taxes. Now, half the money goes to infrastructure, and half the money goes towards property tax relief. But let me argue for just a moment here. Does any of that money get wasted? All of that money offsets property taxes, because if it wasn't for the sales tax, we would still take care of infrastructure with property tax. You agree with me on that, right? It's a trick question, Dale. Say you live in Wichita today, okay? You live in Wichita. Better yet, who lives in Wichita? Brandi, do you live in Wichita? Your parents, talk about your parents for a second here. Your parents pay taxes to Wichita and Sedgwick County if they live in Wichita. Because of the 1% sales tax, how much has their property tax been reduced by? So the 1% sales tax is intended to reduce property taxes. Well, how much benefit do they get? I know nothing about their finances, but this is true for everybody who lives in Wichita, okay? As a Wichita citizen, how much mill levy was reduced? How much mill levy was reduced for a Wichita resident because of the 1% sales tax right now? Take a wild guess. How many mills? How many mills of property tax reduction? Bear in mind, we're at 26 mills and change right now for the county. Okay, how many mills of property tax reduction are they enjoying because of the 1% sales tax?
It's like 1%.
Well, talk about mills. So one mill on a $100,000 house is $11.50 per year taxes. So if it's a $200,000 house, one mill would be worth $23, okay? Do the math. So if it's a $400,000 house, it's $46 for one mill. Or you might do it this way, 4 mills on a $100,000 house is $46. It goes, so again, you can start extrapolating that both in value and mill levy rate. Take a wild guess, how many mills reduction are they having on their property tax, the total tax bill, because of the 1% sales tax?
1, 3.
Zero? 24. 24 mills property tax reduction.
In Wichita, how much is
If you're a Wichita citizen, you're paying 24 mills less right now because of the county-wide 1% sales tax.
So what about in Derby?
Oh, it's even higher in Derby. Derby has a 1% sales tax that Derby has levied, okay? Some of that money goes towards parks and some new things they're doing. But some of that money goes towards funding government, right? The fire department or library, to name two specifically. Derby just went from a 0.5% sales tax to a 1% sales tax. We just voter approved. And with that 1% sales tax, so there was a 0.5% increase, they're going to create some more parks and things. So that's growing government. But the people voted for it, okay? But the 0.5% that they were charging before, okay, is essentially offsetting property taxes, okay? So Derby, I would say right now, I don't know the exact number, it's about $325,000 is 1 mil in Derby, roughly. I probably should get the exact numbers here, but so if anybody's watching this, please don't get mad at me. But it's about $250,000 is equal to 1 mil in Sedgwick County. And they get about $6 million from Sedgwick County 1% sales tax. So do the math. That is that's a lot, okay? That's 18, that's 20, that's,
Building a new wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
yeah, they are, but that's government. So again, do they need it? I don't think they're wasting money. They're doing things that are needful. So again, that's about 18 mils of property tax just for the $6 million we give them from the county. On top of that, they have the 1% sales tax that they levy on themselves. You add that in there, it's closer to like 40 mils of property tax total. The Derbyites are not paying property taxes because of sales tax dollars being collected in Derby. It's around 40 mils of property tax we're not paying. Do the same thing we're doing. So if you want to do the very same kind of government, you got this look like you're not buying my comment here. Go ahead. Let me go back to Wichita, okay? So Wichita charges, right now, Wichita is, they get about $90 million this last year. So let me just do the math here. The 1% sales tax countywide generated $140 million last year. Of the $140 million last year, Wichita got $90 million of that. This question here talks about how do you divide up the when you have a countywide you have a countywide sales tax, there's a law that says how you divide the money up. The cities get portions of that. We don't get to keep it all. It's a countywide sales tax, Sedgwick County sales tax, but we don't get to keep the money. It's divided up amongst all municipalities. So all 20 cities get a portion of the $140 million. But it's based on their population is the biggest part of that. So half the money goes to population. We only get credit for the unincorporated population. So we don't get, even though every county resident is a Sedgwick County resident, right? We don't get to count 535,000 people. We only get to count the unincorporated portion of the population. So of half the money, we get whatever that percentage is. Take the whole total population and say that 78, 79% of the people live in the city of Wichita. They get 79% of that half, the sales tax. Okay, the other half is divided up by the tax levy. So the tax levy says if you collect more dollars in taxes, you get a larger percentage. Take the total property taxes paid for by all residents to all the municipalities, including Sedgwick County, and think of it as a percentage. So a percentage, I told you, about 20% of my property tax bill goes to Sedgwick County government for me. Okay, if that was countywide, if everybody paid 20%, okay, that means that we would get 20% of that 50% of the money would go to the Sedgwick County. So basically what that means is half the money is divided up by population, half the money is divided up by tax levy. Here's the problem. We lowered our mill levy by 1.4 mils this last year. So we gave up, I told you, about $11 million in property taxes we didn't collect. What that does is it means we're getting dinged on sales tax dollars. See? Now the money was intended to offset property taxes. So you would think by lowering the tax levy, the property tax levy, I should be rewarded as a governing body and get more of the dollars of the sales tax. But it works the other way around. It's actually it's a detriment to us. It's actually a negative incentive. It disincentivizes us to lowering the mill levy rate because we lose sales tax dollars when we do that. See what I'm saying? So what this bill does in finance, it changes the way it changes this to go from tax levy to assessed value. That's what that does. So the 50% of the money is still going to be by population, but the other half of the money, if this was to pass, would divide up the second half of that money, or $70 million, by assessed value rather than by tax levy. Not the dollars, okay, but by assessed value. So in other words, if I grow the city and we have more assessed value, we get a larger portion of that half the sales tax revenue. So bear in mind, there's going to be winners and losers on this. We stand to gain some money because we're very conservative. We've been lowering the mill levy. We would stand to gain some revenue out of this if this was to change. Derby, on the other hand, will lose a couple $1 million per year. Maybe not a couple million, but like, I'm not sure exactly. I have the math if you want to know the details. Let's say it's $1 million. Derby would lose $1 million in tax revenue. So again, what was a 40 mil reduction now becomes a 37 mil reduction, okay? They're still winning big time. There's still a big reduction in your property taxes, but not as much as it would have been, okay? So we're going to receive more money to the county, but there's cities out there that are going to have to lose some revenue. Why is that? Because they've not lowered the mill levy. I should say, we lowered the mill levy, but our assessed value is going up. Whereas they have not lowered the mill levy and their assessed value is not going up as much. Does that make sense? So the combination of those two things means that we stand to gain some revenue. The cities stand to lose some revenue. Wichita would lose revenue to the county. So as an item of discussion here, the cities are upset about this proposal. Understandably, I get why they're upset. But philosophically, if you just remove yourself from, say, I'm on the county side, I'm on the city side, remove yourself from the personal impact that this might have on your jurisdiction. Philosophically, don't you agree that you should be rewarded for lowering the mill levy?
Yeah.
I think that should make sense.
It does. The idea that you're incentivized to keep your mill levy high so
Right.
that you get a greater portion is.
It seems backwards. So one of the proposals, I think, is we're trying to figure out as a state how to handle this. I think the state understands there is a problem with this. But how do you go from what we have today to where we want to be in the future? I would like to see some type of a transition plan. Maybe you would say something like this. This just frees everyone's taxes until there's enough tax revenue for everybody to move up, not down. No one should ever move down. So we freeze everybody's, the increase goes to those that deserve more money until there's enough money that everybody starts seeing increases in the future. Because property taxes and sales taxes have one thing in common. They tend to trend upward. Revenues will almost always go up. There's some years in recession, it may go down a little bit, but generally speaking, it's going to go up. So as the increases happen, we will use those increases to again, transition ourselves into the new formula over time. Does that make sense? That's the idea. So the legislature's taking a look at this. It's pretty dicey. Any questions on those two ideas, the corrections money or the sales tax funds? It's interesting, isn't it?
What happens if you just went to a statewide flat tax? Sales tax.
Well, first of all,
Everybody would blow their sales tax.
right now Wichita doesn't charge a sales tax. Right? We charge a sales tax and they get the money, okay? I think to do that, some jurisdictions charge up to 2% sales tax. Some jurisdictions don't even charge a sales tax. I think Wichita is one of the largest cities in the entire nation that doesn't have a sales tax. Okay, so if you start doing that, I think you disrespect, if you will, the jurisdiction, the will of the people. What's that?
You don't have any property tax, you just do it all on the flat 10%.
Well, that's an interesting idea. I actually have, it's not actually in here, but I do have a proposal. If you want, I can talk about that. There's a lot in this platform here that we could talk about, but there is an idea we're being discussed right now. It's not part of this right now, at least not yet. And that is, should we consider a dedicated sales tax for culture, recreation, and community programs? But that dedicated sales tax would offset what's already in the budget. So our property taxes would go down. Let's say property taxes would go down 4.5%, okay? It'd be a 0.25% sales tax. Generates about $35 million per year. So we lower the property taxes by 4.5 mils. So this is going down. So understand, it's not a tax increase. It changes where we get the money from, okay? Sales taxes are paid for by 30% pull factor, which means people who live outside the jurisdiction are paying part of the sales taxes. So there's a pull factor, right? So of the sales taxes, we collect $35 million. Around 10 million, maybe 12 million of that was from people who don't even live here. All right, so we lower the sales tax by property taxes by 4.5 mils, and the sales taxes goes up 0.25%. So that means on $100, let's see, that means on $100 worth of spending, retail spending, not food, but retail spending, tennis shoes and pizza. Okay, you're going to pay 25 cents, 25 cents charge on $100 worth of retail spending, and to do that we will lower the property taxes by 4.5 mils. Okay, but that money would then be dedicated to the cultural recreation and community programs, things like Sedgwick County Zoo and Exploration Place. There needs to be an advisory board that figures out the zero-sum game of dollars, how to divide those monies up amongst the entities that are eligible to receive that funding. Again, culture, recreation, and community programs. Things like Project Access, the Child Advocacy Center, might be a good one. The Extension Office. Those are community programs, okay? African American Museum, Lake Afton, all that stuff would be funded through that 0.25% sales tax. But then the property taxes goes down. So again, so if I ask someone, do you want me to get rid of the 1% sales tax? 1%, should we get rid of that? People say, well, yeah, get rid of that. That's a good rate. We should lower sales taxes. But then I said, well, but we're going to have to increase your property taxes by 24 mils. They'd be like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Don't do that. They don't want to do that. So let me flip the question around then. If 24 mils reduction is good because of the 1% sales tax, why not go to 1.25% sales tax? And I could lower it even further. Not just 24 mils, but almost 30 mils, right? But it would go down about 30 mils in property tax. Is that a good idea? Should we do that instead? That's the question. And so when people hear this, though, and they say, well, Jim Howell wants to increase taxes, that's not what I said. I'm talking about taking away a tax and giving a different tax, replacing a tax with a tax. Some people say it doesn't really matter to me. A tax is a tax is a tax. I don't care. It's all bad. Okay, that might be true. Some people see it all the same. Some people say that sales taxes. Pardon me? Sales taxes is discretionary. You make a choice if you want to spend. Go to Goodwill and buy tennis shoes at Goodwill, or go to the Nike store and buy $200 worth of pair of tennis shoes. Can you even get a pair of tennis shoes for $200 anymore? I don't know. I have never owned a pair like that.
People that are coming outside are helping fund that too.
And people from outside are funding that, right?
I guess that would be my concern is where's the balance of revenue neutral? Because you can calculate a loss of income out of one and a gain of income, or revenue, loss of revenue from one and a gain of revenue from the other. But as you increase your sales taxes, you may start to lose some people that do come in to the area because they choose not to use their discretionary funds here.
That's a very interesting point. So the question is, does it change behavior, right? That's a great question. I'll say this. I don't know that a 0.25% sales tax would substantially change behavior. But if you start getting to 2 or 3%, yes, you're talking about changing behavior, of course. And, Kansas City is a great example. Missouri and Kansas are always fighting over the border here about. You can see by changing tax rates up there, a tiny small amount, what happens up there. People crossing the border to get their groceries type of stuff, or whatever they want to buy up there. I will argue this. And I'm Republican. Democrats many times are saying we don't like consumption taxes because it's really hard on poor people. You have a disproportionate burden on poorer people, and that's the Democrat talking point. Okay. I would argue this, that taxing your housing is worse.
Yeah. And they're paying that
All right?
way, even if they're renting.
So right now, if you're renting, you're still paying property taxes to your rent. Okay. So again, if you live in a home, I don't care what level you live in, but your mortgage is not sales taxed, your insurance is not sales taxed, your property taxes are not sales taxed. Okay. So all of your living expenses relate to your home in terms of your mortgage, your insurance, and property taxes are not sales tax, but neither is your electricity, your water, your sewer, your trash, your internet. None of that stuff has sales taxes applied. Okay? So everything you need to live in your home does not have a sales tax applied to it. It's when you go out and you have discretion, you say, I'm going to go and spend money on whatever, that you make a choice to spend some money on sales taxes, which then funds a portion of the government, right? By the way, let's not forget that Kansas is taking over $1 billion a year out of Sedgwick County on sales taxes. So, I would rather see us have some property tax relief by shifting some of our property tax burden over to sales taxes. To me, it's a good trade-off. I would like to see us do that. But this ought to be a ballot question. So right now, I've developed a resolution that brings all this up. We're going to have a Board of County Commissioners discussion about this. I don't know if they're going to like it or not going to like it. I don't know what they're going to do with this. I have no idea. If they like it, then we need to adopt it as an approved plan for Sedgwick County, so to speak. Then we have to go to the legislature. We have to ask them for permission to put this on a ballot. And if the legislature agrees to put it on the ballot, then next, sometime in 2026 in the fall, August or November, you'd see this appear on the ballot. And if it passes, it still takes about a year to implement. It doesn't happen right away. part of the resolution also has a sunset. So it has to be revoted upon in 2030. So in 4 years. So you vote in 26, you have to do it again in 2030. So if we lie to you and say, we're going to lower your property taxes, but we don't do it, then you have a chance to say, you all lied to us, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to undo this now. So we have 4 years to prove to you we're going to do what we said we're going to do. Then every 8 years thereafter, it has to be passed again. So if you ever don't pass this, it goes away forever. See? Now, bear in mind, if it ever doesn't pass, I assume what that means is it goes back on property taxes. But this is a way for us to fund culture, rec, and community programs by the will of the people and lower property taxes. And I think we've proven it to the people that we're going to do what we said we're going to do. And if we don't do that, then you have a way to get back control of your tax rates.
So, I mean, I like this. I like this conceptually. One of the concerns that I do have about what you just mentioned right there is the limitation of the ability of people to translate from one source to another. So, I mean, because they're going to see their all these things always juggling and moving up and down over a period of time, and it can be very difficult for them to be able to say, you know what, this is still up, and this didn't go down where it was supposed to go, because they're constantly in motion anyway.
Let me change angles here. Anything else on the platform that you guys want to talk about before I move away from that? Because I'll give you a few more things to chat with here. Anything else on the platform you want to bring up before I move away from that? Yeah.
Can you just summarize full corrections with the SB 367 whole fiasco with the juveniles and stuff?
Thank you, Brandi and Shannon, for coming tonight. So Senate Bill 367, as you know, passed in 2016. It was a rewrite of the juvenile justice code for the entire state of Kansas. And in doing that, they made it nearly impossible to charge juveniles with crimes unless it's really a serious crime, like someone gets hurt or like shot or killed. In which case they use the adult system primarily to go after and charge these kids. And so we have House Bill 2329 has passed the Kansas House. It's now waiting for the Senate. I have a community roundtable, I have a roundtable discussion on October the 30th. I'm bringing in both the chair of the House Corrections as well as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. As long as I'm also going to have law enforcement and district attorney and some judges and Ember Hope and DCF and some legislators and some city council members and some county commissioners. We'll all be at the table. There's a few others that are going to be there. We're going to discuss House Bill 2329. There is opposition to the bill, primarily from the state corrections and from state DCF. One of the things that 367 did is it took away all the group home beds for criminogenic kids. So now we're using foster care to handle this population, and foster care is primarily handling children in need of care. It was called SINK kids. And SINK kids have no parents. They are abused and neglected children. And we're using foster care to manage those kids. They need help. But now we're taking the criminogenic kids and we're putting them in the same population. It's destroying our foster care system. So House Bill 2329 forces separation of those two populations. It creates some group home opportunities for these kids. And one thing we've heard about recently in the news, almost it seems like almost daily, is some kids get guns and shoot up the city. Shooting up each other, shooting and killing each other, shooting at each other, kids with guns, shooting up all kinds of stuff. I'm a huge supporter of the Second Amendment, but I don't think it's okay for children to have access to stolen firearms and shoot up each other. That's not okay. And so what this bill does, it actually establishes new and necessary penalties for kids that are caught in possession of stolen guns. It doesn't have to be stolen. But kids getting caught in possession of a firearm, again, not with the permission of an adult. So if I have Johnny goes out to my trunk and gets my handgun out of the trunk and brings it in the house and gets caught in the driveway by a police officer, we're not talking about that kid. We're talking about kids who are stealing guns out of cars. They're driving around town in stolen cars and shooting guns out the window, doing gang activity, shooting each other, shooting up, who knows what, taking loaded guns to school. On it goes. These type of kids need to be managed differently than we're currently doing this. Right now, there is no consequences for these kids. Unless someone gets shot or killed, there is no consequences for these kids. And they know it. And so that's why last year in 12 months, we actually booked into JIAC over 200 children with possession of firearms last year.
Wow.
Yeah, think it's a problem?
That's Sedgwick County or just?
Sedgwick County, just Sedgwick County.
This roundtable on October 30th, is that something we can attend?
Not really. It's by invitation only. I'm sorry about that, but we need to have, I'm trying to find a way to resolve the conflicts with DCF, and I'm trying to get Kelly Warren, the chair of the Judiciary, and Bob, forgot his last name for a second there. But anyway, the chair of House Corrections to come in and to talk about the opposition of the state of Kansas and why are they opposed. I think part of me says that the Department of Corrections is opposed primarily because it gives them more work to do, and they would rather not do this. Well, I think that's inappropriate for them to be opposed. They're the most appropriate agency to handle this population. They're also against both DCF and Department of Corrections are against, well, DOC is against the mandates in the bill. I would think we can fix that with some discretion for judges. We can add some discretion opportunities. And the DCF and Department of Corrections is against it somewhat because they don't like the idea of the group homes. They think there's not money to support that. Well, I disagree. When the Senate Bill 367 passed, they closed down 500 beds in the state of Kansas that weren't existing. They closed them down, defunded them. So the idea that we can't get 25 to 45 beds in the state of Kansas, in my opinion, is just not true. But we may have to pay for it. But it's better to have these kids in a place that's designed for them, that have difficult population, with services being provided to these kids in that setting, and not mingle these kids with sink kids. That's important to me. So I think that this bill needs to pass. Thank you for the question. Where was I going to go with this?
It's just a question.
What's that?
I think it was just a question.
Yeah, I had another thing I was going to bring up here, but well, if there's no other questions, did you guys have questions over here? You didn't really say much tonight, but you have any questions this evening?
Just learning.
Good. I like to do these about 3 times a year, 4 times a year, 3 times a year, and
And if we do have time, I'd like to get back to that better way to pay the property tax.
yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. So property tax reform, the state of Kansas is toying with the idea of capping assessed value growth. That sounds good on the surface, and they're probably going to do this. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. They're going to put this on the ballot, and people are going to vote for it to be a constitutional amendment that caps assessed value growth. The problem with that is, I would argue the very best system, the fairest system, is to have accurate appraisals. If everybody has an accurate appraisal, right now we have an appraisal system that's filled with errors, okay? So if there's, and I'm going to be harsh in how I say this, but if you have an appraisal system that has errors, it means that someone is undervalued on their home, they're underpaying their tax burden. Someone else is overvalued on their home, and they're overpaying their tax burden. They're paying their taxes for someone else. I call them a victim of a broken system, okay? In fact, I think it's unconstitutional because Constitution says we can't take someone's property. It's their property. We're taking their property without their permission, without just cause, without due process, if you will, without compensation. We're taking their possessions to fund a system because this guy over here is not paying his fair share. I would argue the fair system. If we're going to use assessed value as a way to fund government, okay, then everybody has to pay a fair share based on your choice on how you choose to live, okay? Someone wants to live in $1 million home versus a $100,000 home. This guy's going to pay 10 times more than that guy's going to pay. That's a choice they make, right? The guy who lives in a $100,000 home could choose to live in a lesser expensive home if he wanted to, okay? We've decided as a society that this is a fair system of taxation. And we don't use it as a way to penalize you. I know you probably paid your house off by now. Hopefully you have. And you say, well, why should I have to pay taxes on a house? I'm over 65 years old. My house is paid off. Why am I paying taxes? Because you're still consuming government. That's the answer. You're still consuming government. And government costs us, the society, money to pay. It's a pay-as-you-go system, right? You're paying for the sheriff today. You're paying for 911 right now, EMS right now. You're paying for the election office right now, and on it goes. All these offices, you're paying for them today. It's a pay-as-you-go system. If you wanted to prepay your taxes, you could do that, but that seems like it'd be kind of harsh. Imagine me making you pay even more than that earlier in your life and making you pay less later in your life. Who wants to do that? I don't. And so the idea that we consider it a fairer system, a simple system, that says we all pay a portion of the cost of government based on how you choose to live, your choice, okay? And so that's the idea of a fairer system. The problem is government costs a lot of money. We have a lot of government. That's the problem. We actually have big budgets, maybe bigger budgets than we should have, right? So we take that great big budget, we divide that up amongst property taxpayers, property tax owners, based on their assessed value. So what can we do differently? I think capping assessed value growth, actually, in my opinion, actually removes us from a fair market reference point. So what ends up happening is someone who's in an area where the values are going up quickly. Let's say you're out here at Cedar Ranch, and you live in these $1.5 million homes, and people keep putting these expensive homes around, and your property values went up 20% this last year. Sounds like, is that fair to them? Probably not, because 20%, inflation was only 3%, but they're paying 20% more. Yep. So should we cap those values at 3%? Should we cap those values at 3%? Is that fair? Bear in mind, if they get capped, someone else is going to pay the government burden, not them, right? So understand, when you cap them, they're not going to pay their fair share. They're going to get a reduction in their tax liability, and that burden then goes to somebody else. See what I'm saying? So by capping the values, you're actually shifting the burden from one taxpayer to the other. That's all you're really doing. You're not controlling the level of government, how much money we spend. You're just changing who pays, right?
It's their choice to buy.
It's their choice to buy that home. Okay, so one of the things I was going to tell you is that I don't think capping assessed value is the right answer. Personally, we had what's called the tax lid years ago. It capped how much we could raise the budget by. We had a cap on the budget. I think that's a better plan. The problem is we had a public safety exemption. Public safety was a large part of our budget, right? We'd say, well, we're going to take our money, we're going to grow the whole budget at 3 or 4%, whatever the cap was that year. It's calculated cap based on consumer price index. But public safety was exempt. Now imagine I put hundreds of millions of dollars into public safety. I could just make a decision to pull that money back into the general budget over here. Oh, now there's a shortfall in public safety? Let me increase the mill levy to cover that piece now. So this fungibility within the budget causes us, so here's the point, for me to work around the tax lid, to follow the tax lid means I have to publish something in the paper, I've got to have a roll call vote, and we have to do something extraordinary, and the people have the right then to force us to bring it back down. There was not one jurisdiction out of 650 municipalities in our state, not one jurisdiction had to do a ballot question over the years of the tax lid from 2015 through 2019. Not one jurisdiction did a ballot question on exceeding the tax lid. Tells you that system had too many holes in it, right? It did not work. It did not do what it was intended to do, because this public safety exemption gave us a way around the problem, right? So the legislature said in 2019, this thing is not working, and I don't blame them for saying that. So they got rid of the tax lid and replaced it with the revenue neutral rate, which in my opinion is still not working. So I would like to see this do this. Go back to the tax lid. No public safety exemption. No exemptions at all. That would be a better system. And I would say this, if you want to exceed the cap is calculated based on consumer price index plus new construction. That's it. Say 4.5% this year. I want to go to 5% because I say, you know what? I want to add 20 more 911 people this year, okay? So I want to go to 5%. Rather than 4.5%, that's the cap. I want to go to 5%. Now I tell the people, we're going to exceed that tax lid by 0.5%. But then you have the option to go get signatures on a petition. You get, I think, 3% of the signatures of the electors. It forces us back, without even a ballot question. The signatures alone forces us to do our contingency budget, holds us back to that 4.5%. That's a better plan. It puts the power back in the hands of the people, and it forces us not to increase our budgets faster than CPI plus new construction, which is a reasonable growth rate. It keeps us tied to the economy. Now I say to you guys, you guys give us the signatures. We were going to hire 20 more people for 911. We can't do that now, so we're not going to hire those 20 people. Sorry, they're not going to be hired. So your 911 system is going to be not as good as I'd like it, but you guys made a choice. Okay, that conversation is going to have to happen then. So I can tell you what's going to end up happening. We'd say, well, we're going to fund the general government. We're going to take money out of public safety to fund general government. And then we're going to tell you guys we're going to increase taxes over here on this public safety thing, but you have to let it pass. If you don't pass it, we're going to not fund those public safety things. So I think manipulation could still happen. It's not a perfect system. There's problems with this. The other thing I was going to tell you is this. I think the property tax bill should be split so that you pay your December payment should be for all local government, and your May payment should be for all the state government. So I mentioned there's 5 things that deal with USD 260 for me. I'd pay my May payment for USD 260, those 5 jurisdictions. I'd pay that to the state of Kansas, Department of Revenue or the Department of Education. I'd pay that to the state. Now maybe it physically goes to the local county treasurer's office and they process that payment. But I want to write that check to the Kansas Department of Revenue or the Kansas Department of Education and give them that check. And then my December payment should be for all local government, city and county. I'd call that Sedgwick County government, Sedgwick County treasurer. I might maybe even call it the local tax payment, the local tax fund versus the state tax fund. What that does for us is it tells us with education where the tax dollars are going and what they do. People still think we don't fund our schools. Well, by splitting that tax bill up and making it 2 different payments, there's no question that you're funding the USDs to this level. That is no longer debatable because it's a separate tax, it's a separate check you have to write. It's a different amount. Right now, you take a total tax bill, divide by 2, you pay the same amount of money. You can pay it all in December if you like. You can pay half in December, half in May, the same exact amount for the exact same recipient of those dollars. We're missing an opportunity. If we simply write the December check to local government and write the May check to state government, at least then you know how much of your money you're spending on schools. I think that needs to be known. So I think that would do a lot to make people less angry about their taxes. It doesn't make you happy, but it does make you less angry because now you know where your money's going to some extent, right?
How do we get appraisals to be accurate?
That is a great question, and we're out of time. So save that one for next time, okay? You know, we have answers to that. We have a comprehensive answer to that question. Actually, there's really good stuff happening in the county. I've got like 6 or 7 things on property taxes we could talk about that gets to the heart of that matter. And I think again, once you get the system more accurate, then the victims in the system are going to be less angry. Right now, I don't blame them. I don't blame them for being angry because they're victims of a bad system. It's broken. Okay? Thank you guys. Appreciate you very much.